Well, thank you for having me. I am very excited to be here. First, I want to say that a lot of the presentations that I've seen here in London this week over the past few days is, in my opinion, is very, very far ahead of what's happening in the States. So a lot of these that's happening in the various schools, universities. It's very just right at the very beginning of what's happening in the States. I've had a few conversations with people talking about what's happening here and some advanced strategies, but back there, people are just now starting to become a little bit accustomed to it. So anyways, I just wanted to talk about that for a bit. But first, I want to see if anybody has ever heard of IBM. Hopefully, if you have, raise your hand. Oh, okay, that's good. I just wanted to make sure. If not, I was going to have a talk with the marketing department here in London and ask them to pump some more pounds in there. So what I want to talk about, again, as Graham introduced, is to talk about what IBM is doing. And really, it's going to be three stages that I'm talking about. First, it's all, of course, connected to mobile. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the connection. How is IBM connected? What's the connectivity inside of IBM? And so I'll just give you some numbers and some brief background on the current mobile landscape. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I want to talk about is a study that we recently commissioned to really understand how IBMers, which are IBM employees, how they're using mobile devices and what they're using it for, and also what they want to use it for in the future. So that's the second part. And the last part, of course, this is the transformation session. So we want to talk about the results of those studies, but also what's happening now, and what are some real, actual projects that are happening, and some bigger projects that are going to happen in the future. So let's go. One second. Okay, so you probably don't know who I am, but let's start straight from the top. And here's a quote from the IBM CEO from about a year ago. Take about 10, 15 seconds to read this. Now, the reason why I started out with this quote, and I also had a conversation with somebody earlier, is really if you want to get mobile adoption, you need support from the very top. And of course, this is the CEO, and this is a quote that he made about a year ago. So what we see inside of IBM is we have support straight from the top, straight from the executive level. And that's a very, very big, important factor, because then that trickles down. A lot of times, as we see, whether we like it or not, people tend to follow the people above them in whatever choices and decisions they make. So this is, for us, was very important, and has started to start a shift in what's happening inside of IBM. So that's the first part. But now let's get to some of the numbers. Again, the first part, the connectivity. So inside IBM, the official mobile device, of course, is the BlackBerry. It has different nicknames, which I won't go into for various reasons, but I'm sure you probably know those. And some numbers is IBM has 400,000 employees. So about 6% of those, which is about 25,000, are official mobile device users. And what I mean by official is that this is connected through the corporate security, where they can get secure access to email, calendar, messages, and the like. They can also have instant messages where they can talk with various IBM colleagues around the world. So and it's not just in the States and in Europe as well. It's all over the world. And as you can see, 64 countries. And the primary users of the mobile devices are managers, and also to a lesser extent, sellers. So it's also good to know who is using these, because as I'm going to talk about in a bit, understanding who our audience is will give us insight into how we want to develop services for them. So that's what's happening there, and of course this all comes with a fee. It's a nominal fee. It would be about, depending on the country and various departments, it's about 10 to 20 pounds a month. And that's it. For about a year ago, I would say it would have been about 1.5 to 2 times that amount. So it is coming down rapidly, but of course there is a fee, and it is what it is there. So the next part is how even in this economic climate, what we're seeing is that there is a very, very big need for this, even now, for IBM to invest in this for their mobile workforce. And so there's about 1,000 people a month growing, and that is accelerating. It has slowed down a bit, but now it's picking back up. So that's good to know there. So now the The next thing is a prediction by the IBM's Chief Information Officer that in 3 years, 100,000 IBMers, which is fourfold from what it is now, will be using not only mobile phones, not just standard feature phones, but also smartphones. And so that actually is a prediction of a very interesting shift. So the question is how can you get from 25,000 to 100,000 and make a very, very big shift? And the answer, I believe, is the previous slide that I showed was about official mobile device users. So you have to go through a very long process, and you have to get approval by your manager, and you can't use your own personal device. So what's going to happen is, what we've seen is there's a lot of IBMers who don't have BlackBerries, who have their own mobile devices, who want to use it to access corporate email. I'm sure that's the case for many of you here who are working in organizations. So what we're going to see is that there is going to be a shift in policy inside corporations where once they get the infrastructure figured out, that people are going to start using their own devices. We're having people now who will pay £300-400 for an iPhone for their own personal use, and they say, well, I just want to use this to access my corporate email. I don't want you to buy a mobile phone or smartphone for me. So we see the need for it, but now in order to get to this 100,000 number value, we think that that's the way that it's going to be. So that's an interesting shift there. So that's really the first part that I want to talk about, is the connection and the future connection within IBM. The second part that I'm going to talk about is the empowerment. One thing that we did is we conducted a research study to see, again, how IBMers wanted to use their mobile devices, what they use it for, and how can we then take some interesting findings that we found and develop actual services that they can do to do their job better. So in this, we see the integration between three things. First, business, organization. It's a corporate workforce, right? It's very, very standard. And the other two things that we've seen here, the second, of course, being technology, and the last being education. Education can either be in the sense of a specific training, or it can be in a performance support type situation, which I will go into. But the basis of the study is that intersection right there. Right in the middle is where we saw the opportunity for mobile devices. Again, the big statement is, as Graham mentioned earlier, is how can mobile devices, which is the technology, be used in a workplace setting to help them with their education or their performance. So a little bit more specifically about that, one thing that we did is we partnered for a research study with Columbia University in New York, and there is a company directory. It's called Mobile Blue Pages. And inside of IBM, all corporations and even schools, I would guess that they have access to this, to just basic information, essentially basic contact information. And so what IBM did a few years ago is create a mobile version for this, accessible through a web browser on the BlackBerry. And so now what happens is anybody can look up any other IBMer from around the world. So say, for instance, right now, I could see, well, who has specific expertise that's in London that I could talk with about some sort of topic. And so that's the gist of it, of the background there. And what we did, we commissioned again, this was a partnering with Columbia University, we commissioned an academic study, and we had over 400 mobile Blue Pages users, which in the academic world, for those of you who are in academia, we achieved significant results. For most of us in the corporate world, they really don't care about what that means, but for that in the academic sense, because this was a partnership with Columbia, they were very, very interested in achieving significant results. And as you can see here are really the top 5 job roles of the various users. And one of them I mentioned earlier, actually the two of them I mentioned earlier, were sellers and managers. And so again, it's very important, as the old saying goes, know thy audience. Know who your audience is, because if you want to design a service for them, you need to know who they are and what exactly they want to do. So that's why it's important there. So now, let's really talk about the findings. So I want to talk about the findings for this. There were some very surprising findings, and that will wrap up the second portion, which will then lead into the third portion, which is what we're doing with these findings. So the first thing is, what should you really use your mobile phone for in the workplace? And the answer to that, many of you may be thinking, but I'm telling you is not true in the corporate world, is courseware. And so what courseware is this idea of where there's a traditional thought process where we can take e-learning modules, we can take an e-learning course and we can invest significant money to put it on a mobile device to where anybody can access courses at any time and any place. What we found out is no, people don't want that. They just don't want to use that. And when you think about it, it starts to make sense. And the reason why is there's, there's this idea of being just in case. Just in case in the sense is we all take courses, we're all in school, we all do this just in case we need some information. And now, when you're mobile specifically, and you're also in the workforce, you don't need information just in case when you're then and there. That's why you go back and use your desktop computer or your laptop or whatnot. A quick background on this is any of these official mobile device users who have the BlackBerry are also required to have some sort of other computer, which is a desktop, laptop, or whatnot. So we know that this isn't the only device that they have. So again, we know our audience here, so we don't need to develop everything on the mobile phone. What we can do is we can figure out, well, what exactly do they want right then and there, which gets into the big sweet spot of our finding, which is performance support. And really what that is just-in-time information. Whether that's late-breaking access to information or getting information on specific tasks that they can use right then and there. So say, for instance, I'm talking with somebody before this talk, and they asked me something about, well, what's happening with an IBM? Can I do something? Can I get some sort of piece of information and access it on my mobile phone? That will help resolve that problem. And so again, what we see, which we'll get into one of the recommendations, is that a lot of sellers, say for instance, when they're meeting with clients, this is a very big win for them, because now they don't need to carry around their laptops with them all the time to a client meeting and worry about, well, can I have the appropriate access? Do I have the appropriate access to information? So that's really the big finding that we found. And so now there are a lot of people, actually the other thing I should say is there are a lot of very big companies, financial technology companies, who are taking the left side of this, which is the courseware route. They're investing significant amounts of money into porting courseware over for mobile phones. And what we're saying is there are certain instances where that could work. So say, for instance, compliance training. But the sweet spot, the number one priority for us right now is performance support, because we can see the results right then and there, just in time. So that's that's one of the big findings. Another side that we see here is mobile usability. So there's three things I want to talk about on the usability side. For those of you who have various types of, I'm sure we've all seen very bad mobile interfaces, and the reason why I want to talk about this for a bit is because, especially on mobile phones, if you have a bad user interface, what you'll see is that people just won't use it. Whether they really need it or not, some of the people will take the time to deal with a bad interface. But a lot of times people don't want to. And so what you want to do, and what we found, is to make these things very, very easy to use. So how do you make it easy to use is the question. One of the ways is to give fewer options. And what we found out through this study, which is this graphic shows here, is that the fewer options that you can give them, the better it is. And again, the reason for that is understanding their purpose of using a mobile phone. So what we found out is that anytime that an IBMer is on their mobile phone, they have a specific purpose. Not just an IBMer, really anybody. If you ask yourself that, what do I want to do? Anytime I pick up my phone, what am I going to use it for? Most of the time, you know exactly what you're going to use it for. Now let's compare that with a desktop or a laptop. People surf the internet, people do various things. That doesn't happen that much on the mobile phone. It partly could be because of the user interface, but really it's because people have very, very specific intentions. They know what they want. So because they know what they want, then we can figure out the top priorities of those and then give them fewer options. Fewer options in the sense of, here's the three top things that we know that they use. The bottom 7, we won't worry about that. They can get that when they get back to their office. So that's the second part there. The third part, again, is speed to access is very, very critical. One of the things that we found out is half of the users that we talk to will only wait up to 30 seconds for a piece of information, no matter how important it is. After 30 seconds, they'll just abandon and either do something else or proceed without it. So if we start to think about that from an educational perspective, that the content that we want our workforce to see that we're providing them, if it takes too long for them to get that, then, well, they just aren't going to use that. So again, that also gets into two things. One, on the educational side, that goes well into, of course, instructional design and things of that nature, and then also from a network side. But again, that also relates back to the second point, which is the fewer options you have, the less information that you need to load, which then, of course, theoretically can speed access to information. So that's the second part about the interesting findings, was the mobile usability. The third part is this big idea of network learning. IBM, as you know, as I mentioned earlier, is a very, very large global company, has about 400,000 employees. So the big question is not, can I find somebody, or does somebody have the answer to the question that I have, which by and large is very true, but how can I find them? That's usually the big issue that we've seen. And one of the findings that we had is, well, as I mentioned earlier, is if you can provide easy ways to find others globally, then getting them that access to information is very, very critical. So there's really two types of ways that you can access information. One is through a database, through some sort of information repository. You can search it, and you can get back standard results. The second one is the classic way. You ask people, because people have information as well. And what you can get through people is not only information, but you can also make a connection with them. And so that's really what we found here, is that network learning is a very, very big part. And we've known that from the traditional desktop laptop use. But now what we're seeing is that IBMers are really starting to use that even for the mobile devices as well. And there's for anybody in academia, there's this very famous study about 35 years ago called The Strength of Weak Ties. For those of you who ever use LinkedIn or any of those other social networks, you see this idea of, well, here are the people that you've connected to. And what we found out here is that people don't use their mobile phones to get information from somebody that they already know. What they do is they find out who they know, and then the people that they're connected to, who they have a weaker tie with, and they often get information from there. So again, they're also getting information, but they're also getting a new tie. And so that was a very, very big finding that we've had, and that pushes into some of the recommendations that we're going with. And the last one, of course, is, well, we all learn from each other, and of course, IBMers learn from other IBMers as well. So that's it's very important, and again, this is a good thing with a lot of these conferences, is that it brings people from all different walks of life together. You can learn a bit from reading materials, but look around you at the tables, look at the people next to you. They're probably the ones who have the better and most relevant information. So that's the second aspect that I wanted to talk about, was the study, the findings from the study, and the empowerment and the things that we found from the results of this. So now the question, of course, this is the transformation session, is what is IBM doing about this, right? And that's probably why most of you are here to really see, okay, what are we doing, and especially from a learning standpoint. So back in June of 2009, IBM Research announced a £60 million over 5-year mobile research investment. That's very, very significant, actually. And also, as a quick aside, I posted the link in the Conference Connect session, so that's also there if for those of you who are accessing any of the information, that you can read the full report. But in general, it's really 3 areas that they're looking at. One is mobile enablement. And really what that means is, let's just build out an infrastructure. Let's put devices in people's hands, because you can't really start anything without getting it in their hands first. So that's the first part. And the second part is an enterprise to the end user experience. One of the things that I mentioned before in one of the findings was this idea of mobile usability. So this is an end-to-end from the enterprise, from these back-end mainframe server systems all the way to the end user, and building an end-to-end experience that is very, very consistent, very, very good, easy to use, that really builds out the whole part. And the last one is growth markets. And the interesting thing about growth markets, I'll get into that a bit on a current project that we have, is there's very, very high potential for growth markets. And that's where we see that a lot of essentially low-hanging fruit, things that we can do very, very simply, but can also have a big impact. And so that's where we want to go there. And so I'm going to talk about 3 projects. The first part, again, to tail on to the growth market, is SMS, text messaging for new hires. And so what we found out is Since January of this year, 80% of new hires within IBM are from growth markets. And there have been a lot of talks here. The one right before as well was talking about in these growth markets. And what we see is that the mobile phone penetration is, in many cases, very, very high, and in a lot of cases, a lot higher than one may expect. And so, but the key difference there is that they're feature phones as opposed to smartphones. So, well, let's use what they already have in their hands, which is SMS. So there's two things that we're doing now, and then we're going to build out some very, very interesting things in the future. The first is just ideas of quick tips. When you're a new hire, when you start a new job, you're becoming acclimated, you get a lot of information that you may not remember all the time. And if you email it to them, or if you give that to them in a traditional way, a tip, well, it just gets put in with all the rest of their emails. The one email I get from you is going to be the same as the other 15 that I have from that day. So what we're doing is we're using an enablement. We are pushing out quick tips. Say, for instance, oh, did you remember to file for your health insurance? Or did you remember to submit your payroll sheets? Again, something very, very quick that we can give them tips on. Or did you know that you can use this expertise discovery tool to help find other people? So what we found out here is that we don't want them to necessarily do these activities through their mobile phone, but it's just an enabler for them to remember and get back to their desktop to do something else. So that's the second one, and then the last one is again dovetailing on that is a learning plan reminder. So IBM, we have a lot of learning plans that for professional development purposes that they can access. So again, we'll push out reminders for them now, and what we're seeing is that this project is already currently underway, and we're starting to see some very significant and high results. So that's the first part. So the second part, as I mentioned earlier, is performance support for sellers. Now, IBM has really rooted itself on sales, and they always say that they don't make a product or service that they can't sell. So, well, how do we service the sellers better? And the first one, that is really mobile access to just-in-time information. Can I get any information that will help me make a decision better and to help me do my job better and to either make a sale or to do something like that? So that's really one of the first ones that we've seen there, and that's a project that's currently underway. And an example of this, what could be in this, if you look at the graphic, it's really just a checklist. They don't need an access to a course, as I said earlier, before they go into a client meeting to review some key notes on how to interact with their client. What they need is just a quick checklist. They may not remember everything that's in there, everything that they need to, but if they just get a quick checklist and rundown, then they can see that, oh, okay, I remember this, and then they're more prepared in getting that information right just in time. And the other one is, of course, as I mentioned earlier, getting appropriate information for sellers, and the other part that we see is getting access to late-breaking information. This could be in some sort of, that it's working out to be some sort of performance support type summary report. So say, for instance, if you're meeting with a financial client, can you get the latest information right before you meet the client? And can that then help you improve your relations with the client and also help you make better decisions? So that's what we're working on next with there. And the last one is this big field of expertise discovery. And there's a few experts right there from all over the world. And what we're seeing, this actually may not be a big surprise to you, is that, well, IBMers use mobile phones primarily to communicate. That may sound funny, but the top 4 uses that we've found through our studies is, well, number 1, they use it for making voice calls. 2, they access email, which is also communication. 3, calendars, accessing their personal calendar, so that's just for personal information. And 4 is messaging, whether that's SMS, text messaging, or instant messaging. Actually, right now I'm working, so they actually don't know that I'm not working right now, so because I'm on my instant messaging client. So again, the big thing that we're starting to build out is this use of knowing how they use their mobile phones, which again is to communicate. So then what we do is we integrate mobility into the expertise discovery. We have a lot of tools that surface new ways of second and third level connections. Now we're building out a mobility view for that to where we can now tell people, say, oh, okay, well, my phone knows that I'm in London now. So it can automatically look and give me experts who are also in mobility and mobile learning in this area that I could potentially contact with. That's just one example. So those are some of the things that we're doing there. And that is all that I have. I think we have a few more minutes, so I wanted to just open up the floor for any questions that you may have. And there's my contact information. Feel free to email me. And I actually do answer email, unlike a lot of people inside various companies. So, but I'd like to open up to any questions that you have.
Thank you for that, Ahmad. There's a particularly good insight into how mobile learning is being now in the corporate sector on quite an enormous scale. I want to take some questions from the audience now. Gentleman here at the front.
Hello? No, you got me there. Hello. Hi, Ahmad. Really interested, actually, in finding out how IBM has managed to move into mobile and using mobiles the way you've been talking about. It was interesting at the point about the fact that you used the BlackBerry in your particular situation, but you were talking also about people coming along with their own devices.
Right.
How has IBM been able to, or how is IBM going to be able to bring those other technologies, those other types of devices into the pool? I mean, you mentioned about the new hires earlier,
right.
But in terms of the technical side, because I think in the corporate situation, and I actually work for a council, that's the biggest problem. The tech guys are saying, we can't do this, and I'm sure it's exactly the same situation in many schools too. How are you getting around that?
That's a good question. I think the big issue for corporations is security. And the reason why they use BlackBerry is that most often tends to be the most secure and locked down device. And at least they were the first ones to the market to do so, which is why then IBM went exclusively with them, and as well as other companies did. But what we're starting to see is that other companies or other devices are now starting to get the level of security that is acceptable to use for various types of communication. Well, one of the things that I mentioned, as you alluded to as well, was the SMS for new hires. And what we've developed there is actually a secure way that we can push out IBM-specific messages that don't have confidential information, but we can push them out in a secure manner. So that essentially is a workaround there, because we're not telling them, we're not giving them phone numbers, we're not telling them something or another, but what we're doing is, it's almost like when you receive an email notification, or you receive oh, you have a new message, go check your inbox. So that the specific place where you get the message may not be secure, but where you go, it still is. So that's where we're starting out now. And then the second part is we're really starting to, we really believe that there will be start to be more open access as far as device availability, where not where it is now, where we tell you the device that you have to use, but now you can bring your own one. But really it's just a matter of time. So great question though, thank you.
Another question. Gentleman in the middle.
Hi, my name's Richard Bowie from Education Leeds. I was really interested in your idea of geographical experts. It seems like a really good idea that maybe we could use in education. So your idea of, if you're in London, somehow or other your mobile technology connects you to somebody more local. Right. Could you expand on that a bit, or
Sure.
is that just a
No, it's yes. So really the whole idea is, I think there was a talk about this yesterday. It was about this sort of situated learning, which is somewhat related to this kind of contextual expertise. If you can get quick access to information, say as we are now, person to person, then what we find out is that more often tends to be more effective than, say, connecting with somebody halfway across the world. So, but to get to your question is, how does that happen? And so currently the way that it happens is that I could search a database through my mobile phone. This is actually currently happening now. I can search for keywords on information. So say for instance, I'm tagged with mobile learning, M-learning, mobility. And if somebody in London in IBM is looking for that, then and if they search that same system on that tag, then I will show up. But the other integration, which is the part of the whole IBM suite of applications, is through my instant messaging application, it shows my availability status. So it says, oh, I'm available, but it says I'm available where? And so based off of that, it'll recognize the signals, the cell towers on my mobile phone, and it'll say, I am in London. And so based off of that, then it has a sophisticated algorithm where it then bubbles me to the top, because then it knows that you searched for mobile learning in London, and I happen to be here as well. So that's the gist of it.
Okay, we're going to have to call it there. Thank you very much, Nabeel.